Chapter 12 is all about conflict and negotiation. Unfortunately, conflict is going to happen. It's just a fact of life. What isn't a fact of life is how you handle yourself during it. So there are certain things that you need to watch out for. So we need to discuss that a little bit. So when I talk about conflict, what is it? It's a disagreement or tension between two or more parties. And normally it's a result of a threat to your needs or your interests or your concerns, something like that. And sometimes it's real hard to resolve the conflict. We talked a lot about personalities. We did personality studies. And when you are in a conflict with someone that has a different theory of life, a different idea, a different personality style, it's hard to resolve those conflicts. But some of the things that you should do is try to resolve it quickly. Don't let it sit and fester. Don't let a week go by and then be mad all this time and then go back and sometimes you sit there and think, well, why was I mad all that time? You need to remain calm and keep your emotions out of it. That is hard. It's really hard for me. I'm an emotional person, so I tend to drag my emotions into it. Listen to the other person. See why you are having the conflict. And you need to take a look at it from the other person's perspective. That doesn't mean that you will agree with them, but just try to listen to it. And you need to think, is there a compromise between that person's idea and yours? Emotions, what you need to do before you start anything is sit here and say, what of this conflict is fact and what is feelings? So don't make it personal. Okay, there's something else going on here. Sometimes you need to stop and think, and if you do decide at the end of all of this that you were at fault, you need to feel free to apologize. You need to make things right. You need to accept responsibility and apologize. So, and one other thing that a lot of people do when they're in a conflict with someone is they want to make sure that everybody around knows about it. Please don't do that. Keep conflict to yourself. It shouldn't be a public issue, because what happens if you were the person that was in the wrong? Because then everyone around is going to know it too. So that can be for personal or at work. But some of the other things you need to think of at work is, if you cannot resolve a conflict, where do you go? You go to your supervisor. If you cannot resolve it with your supervisor, there's one of two things. If you are part of a union, you would go to your union and try and get it resolved. If you're not part of a union and it's that bad of a conflict, you may go to your HR department, or there's a thing in companies and it's called a grievance process. You need to go through that grievance process. You need to look at their policy and say, okay, after my supervisor, where do I go? So make sure that you know what that grievance process is. A union will probably assign a shop steward, and they will research what is going on, and they will try to help you through it. But try to keep it from going to that point. Try to resolve it with the other person. Some managers just have a real problem with conflict, and they don't know how to resolve things like this. And in your book, it talks about 5 different management styles in conflict. One of them is forcing conflict management. And that person forces one person to accept the other person's ideas without the person that is being forced having any say in it. So they deal with it directly, they make a decision, they may force you or the other person to accept it. So that's called forcing it. There are those people who avoid conflict. That's not a very good manager because you're going to have conflict. They don't deal with the issue. You may tell them and they just sort of laugh it off and they say, oh, that's not a problem. But that's not going to help you. So, and then there's the other one, this is the accommodating conflict. And that person allows someone to have their idea without even knowing that there was a conflict. So that's really not very good either. And then there is a compromising conflict. And that person will talk, they will listen, and they will manage to get each of you to give a little bit, to come up with a compromise. And that's probably a really good manager that can do that. And then there is the collaborative conflict. And both persons, they are there and they have the people, both parties figure out what can they do to arrive at a solution. So the compromising conflict is forcing a compromise on you. The collaborating is there to support you and have you two come to an agreement. So those are the 5 types of management style. I've been in positions where I've had almost all of them. And there are some that are better than others. It just depends upon the situation. And then we talk about negotiating. What is negotiating? Well, negotiating is creating a solution to conflict that is fair to all. And what a lot of times you could do negotiation between the 2 parties in conflict. Sometimes you need a mediator, which is a neutral third party that listens and helps make suggestions to help you come up, both sides to come up to a resolution. And go through your book and look at the different types of behavior during negotiation, conflict and negotiation. You can be super assertive, you can be passive, you can be aggressive, but read up on those and see which you think would really work for you. Now, this conflict can be from harassment, it can be for workplace policies, it can be just about everything. So if you are being harassed and this is not resolved, I think we talked about this once before. What do you do if you are being harassed and you cannot resolve it at the company level? Remember, you can always go to EOC, Economic Opportunities Commission. That is the government agency that helps with this. Watch and see how you file a complaint. Once again, be sure you go through the company's grievance process. Most of them call a grievance process. There are some companies that just call it a complaint process. And always remember, you have rights in this. You have the rights to be in a harassment-free workplace. That's more than anything. You don't need to be harassed by other employees, customers, management. You have the right to work in a harassment-free area. You have the right to have access to your union. Okay? And you have to make sure, one of the big things you have rights to and you should be doing through this whole process is documenting what is going on. You can report you should be able to, in a non-threatening way, report inappropriate behavior. And there's one person in a workplace that I really don't care for. And as a manager, I've dealt with these. As an employee, I've dealt with them also. And those are the workplace bullies. Those workplace bullies are not only harassing, but they're forcing their way on you and everything else. You have the right to be free of workplace bullies, and your manager needs to help you. It doesn't do you any good to retaliate on their behavior because they know the way around the system. What you have to do is work within the system and have documentation of when, where, and what was said. And in today's society, there is a lot of workplace violence. Be very careful, please. Be aware of unresolved conflict. It can escalate to workplace violence. Make sure that you're watching. And if you see signs of upcoming workplace violence, not only verbal signs, but nonverbal signs. You see a person withdrawing from the situation. You see that they act mad all the time. Watch for those warning signs. Tell somebody about those warning signs. If they don't do something about it, move up the chain of command and do something about it, because workplace violence happens. It happens every day in today's society, and it's really bad. It's better to be safe than sorry. So in sometimes overall, in all of this conflict and negotiation, one of the things that you may ultimately come down to is that you have to agree to disagree. You may have disagreements with other people, and that's okay. That's okay. I disagree with a lot of people. I just don't discuss some things with people because I know that I will disagree. So I have to just agree to disagree. So, and that's something, you don't have to like all your colleagues, but you have to demonstrate professionalism and show them respect, because those things that you don't agree with, there's always something that you are going to agree with them on. Okay? So in this chapter, what you have is you have the study guide questions, and you have a little exercise for conflict management and negotiation. Okay? And I'll see you for the next chapter.